Well, let's look at question number 183 in the Catechism of the Constitution of the United States. The Catechism, Stansbury's Catechism of the Constitution of the United States, question 183, out of 333 questions. We have to mention 182. Who executes the laws which Congress has made? Answer, the President of the United States. The President of the United States. Who executes? That means who enforces, by force if necessary, the laws which Congress has made. The President of the United States. Why is DJ Trump, why did he order out the National Guard, take command of the National Guard? Oh, Newsom said he commandeered them. No, he took command. That's what the Constitution allows him to do. If you won't do your job, you silly boy, worse than that, then we're glad we got a president that will execute the laws of the United States. Now, if you'd have done your job and taken command of the National Guard, that wouldn't have been necessary that he do it. That's why we have it set up that way, so that if you don't do something, he will, and people won't die, and their personal property won't be stolen and annihilated. And the federal property will not be annihilated. The movement of the U.S. mail will not be stopped or impeded in any way. The federal courthouse will not be threatened. Well, that's his job. He enforces the laws. And by the way, he also enforces laws such as treaties made with other countries. He enforces international law on the high seas. That's why we have the Navy, to keep the sea lanes open so that the traffic across the oceans and the trade will continue. And the air forces of the Navy and the air forces of the Air Force, so that our shipping in our country and our allies will not be attacked from the sky. We're supposed to be there to stop that, and he is the one that has command of enforcing those kinds of laws, internally, if necessary, and internationally. Can the president, number 183, can the president make law? Answer, not at all. No. 1,000 times no. These two powers, making law and executing law, are kept by the Constitution entirely separate. The power that makes the law cannot execute the law. Why? Because we're a common law country. You see, in the rest of the world, whoever makes the law also enforces it. Whoever makes the law also interprets it. The courts are nothing but civil servants in the rest of the world, almost every country. They hold their jobs, the judges in those courts hold their jobs at the imperious breath, the caprice of the one that makes the laws and the one that enforces the laws. Those courts are just arms of a solidarity of government. In our common law country, our branches of government are separate, co-equal, and do what they believe to be right, regardless of what the other two are doing. Have you noticed that? Well, it's nice when they agree, but when they don't, everybody's got to make their own decision, just like Paul did. When the court said, you got to do this, he said, well, with all due respect, Judge, and I show all respect and deference to the court, but I've got to do what I believe to be true and right, and my convictions are strong. As strong or stronger than yours. I mean, if you really have those kind of convictions, don't deny them. Be respectful always to everyone around you, including the courts. Always be respectful in your speech. But we must obey God rather than men. That's what Paul did. Paul, my friend, the other elder here, the unofficial elder in church, he obeyed God rather than men. And even then, when his church couldn't see what had to be done, apparently, I don't know why they went against him, but he didn't just say no, he went through the process. He took it through all of due process. That's our common law tradition. Give every opportunity for those whom you have arranged yourself under, namely the authority of the elders of his church. We're talking order, friends. He followed the order. That's what God says to do. But in the final analysis, you must choose, but give the order. DJ Trump allows the order of our courts, that separate and co-equal branch, to work itself out, get to the Supreme Court, make its decision, hoping that they can agree. It's important that we follow due process. That's our common law. Our common law is due process. The process that is due and owing to all concerned. It's a course of process in our common law tradition. Let it play itself out. Paul did that for 9 years. Gave it every opportunity to see, to be heard, and to see the sense or the nonsense of what they were saying. So the President of the United States has no power to make law. The Constitution of the United States says in the first article that all ALL legislative power shall be in what? A Congress of the United States. Legislative power, that's a fancy Latin word that means lawmaking. Who gets to make law in your state? Your state legislature. No, your governor, that's the executive branch. He doesn't get to do it. No, the courts, that's the judicial branch. They're the ones that decide in specific cases how it's supposed to be applied, using the jury, hopefully. But the executive in common law governments, such as the governor of your state or the president of the United States, have no lawmaking powers by law, our common law. Oh, wait a minute, Brant. What about executive orders? Isn't that the president making law? Answer, no. No. Well, what are executive orders? Executive orders are the orders that the executive gives to those working in the executive branch, a separate and co-equal branch of government. When DJ Trump gave an order to the commander, the general officer of the militia or the National Guard of California, to mobilize and protect the U.S. courthouse in Los Angeles here recently, that was an executive order. Is there something wrong with that? No, that's him doing his duty, an executive order. When he says to the Secretary of Defense, when he says to the Secretary of Security, when he says to the Justice Department, do this, do that, do this, do that, signs an executive order, puts it in writing if he wants. That's not making law, and that does not apply to you. It applies to them. And just within the executive branch, it does not apply or control the Congress of the United States or the Supreme Court. No, they're separate and co-equal. Is there any advantage in this arrangement? Answer, certainly. It is the great safeguard of freedom, because if the one makes oppressive laws, the legislative branch, the other may refuse to execute them. If Congress makes an unconstitutional law, the Supreme Court of the United States may strike it down and say that's unconstitutional. And the president, if they make an unconstitutional law, he may say, I'm not enforcing that. And they do that a lot, by the way. Or if the Supreme Court of the United States says, no, Mr. President, you cannot command and mobilize the National Guard, the president may say, I disagree, and I'm going to mobilize them. Why? Because he took an oath to support and defend the Constitution. He didn't take an oath to support and defend the Supreme Court of the United States decisions. You know, in the judicial branch, lawyers say, hey, that's what the Supreme Court said. That's the law, and that's what we're going to argue. Well, that's in the judicial branch. That's what lawyers do. They're officers of the judicial branch. They don't command the president or the Congress, and they don't argue to them either. The judicial branch follows its own precedents. See? Separate and co-equal branches of government is the genius of our common law tradition. By the way, our next class, Sheriff Darleaf has agreed to be presenter in our next law class. And the law class is comparative law, comparing and contrasting our common law, our law of the land, with the law of the city, the civil canon laws of Rome, the Code of Justinian, that governs every country in the world, the Code of Justinian, in its various forms. We're going to compare and contrast our law of the land with the law of the city at the fundamental level. Please join that class. You can't understand our common law tradition. Nobody can, unless it is being compared and contrasted with its ever-present antagonist. It's an adversarial tradition. The law of the city is inquisitorial. The law of the land is adversarial. Therefore, adversity is required to make it come alive. And the more adversity there is, the stronger it gets. I'm not opposed to adversity. In our courts, we have adversity. They don't do that in the rest of the world. Separation of powers, the three branches of government. That's our common law tradition. They don't have that in the rest of the world. We're going to talk about those things in more detail. Please take the course. Go to commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com. And when you go there, go to Winter's Inn of Court. You'll find the law courses there. And if you take this course, you get with the course the comparative law text, Excellence of the Common Law. 958 pages. You get it in the digital form, because I want to do some reading assignments in it during the class. Well, the advantage of the separate and co-equal branches of government, for example, the president has no authority to make law. If the legislature or anyone makes an oppressive law, the president may refuse to enforce Congress's laws. Or if one wishes to do tyrannical acts, the other branch of government may refuse to make a law for them to do that. 185, how does any man become president of the United States? How does any man become president of the United States? Question 185, answer, he is chosen by the people of the United States. Simple answer. He is chosen by the people of the United States. He uses the word elected here, and in parentheses, he has the word chosen. I'm glad he does that. The word elected is from the Greek New Testament. Eklektos, the Greek word. Eklektos. It's translated the elect. The Bible says that God's people are eklektos. God even calls it's translated church, the word ekklesia. Ekklesia. That's the word eklektos with the preposition meaning out of, chosen out of. Eklektos in English means chosen. The English word that means what eklektos means is chosen. And he has both here. I'm glad he does. How does one become president? He is chosen. Eklektos. Chosen out from among others. 186. Question 186. How is this done? Do the people themselves at once choose the president? No. This would lead to great confusion. But the people choose the legislatures of the different states. The legislatures appoint electors, and those electors choose the president. Did you hear what I said? Let's get the simplicity of what we call the Electoral College. It's not understood. The mass movement in the United States to get away from it, do away with the Electoral College, and make the president popularly elected. Why do we have the Electoral College? Why does our Constitution include it? I'll tell you exactly why. You can see it today like it's never seen before in the history of the world. In America. Because if we didn't have the Electoral College, the cities of the United States would choose the president. And those that live in flyover America, the rural area of America, over 80%, would have no say in anything. That's why. That's why. Isn't it true that even now, when we do take the popular vote, we do that. It doesn't choose the president, but it tells us what the popular majority idea is. And the electors that do choose the president can look at that and decide what they want to do. But we have these layers because we want to be careful and not allow a purely popular, a majority election of the president, because if we did, the culture of the city, those that live under the city law, the consumptive culture of cities would choose the president. There would be no balance. Remember, 80% of America is not urban. And in the last few presidential elections, well, going back quite a while now, one candidate will take the urban areas, 20% of America, and the other 80% will go to the other candidate. And if there ever gets a time, if there ever is a time when there are more voters in the urban areas than in the rural areas, we're sunk if we use popular elections. We shouldn't do that. We shouldn't do it for U.S. senators, and our Constitution set it up so that we would not have that kind of a popular election for U.S. senators. We've changed that, unfortunately. So now in every state, the cities choose the U.S. senators. If we get rid of the Electoral College, it'll be that way with the President of the United States. And anytime in the history of the world where cities controlled the rural areas, the country failed and went down. That's what happened in Rome, by the way, the Roman Empire. And the law of the city is all about cities. Why did Biden open the borders to allow millions in who would go to the cities? Where did they offer them? The towns and the cities. Stay here, we'll pay for everything. Vote for us. In Illinois, Texas, California, New York, Washington, the state of Washington, and others probably. Those are the main ones. The cities control every office in state government. The governor, the secretary of state, the attorney general, they're from the cities vote them in. City life and city mindset are not like rural life, friends. Never have been. The grand distinction between political parties is always the law of the land, the law of the city. I talked to a lady not long ago. Well, it's been a few years. Went to school with my boys. She was from communist China. Came to school in America. She's still here. Married a welder in Houston, Texas. Had a mobile welding business. They got a family now. Sweet gal. She said, Brent, the Chinese government is building cities. They're trying to get everybody in the cities. They build the cities. They put Walmarts, McDonald's, everything that you could want, and they try to persuade the Chinese people that live out on the steppes of northern China and place to come into the cities and live. Why? So they can control them, citify them. Rome occupied Britain until, well, through the 4th century, about 400 years. What did they do? They built cities complete with aqueducts, running water, baths, the public bath. They encouraged them to wear the toga, take on the city life, be city folk. Because the law of the city demands cities. Without cities, the law of the city doesn't work. The metropolis, that's Latin, no, Greek rather, for mother city. Rome was the mother city. The church made it the mother city, the mother church. Why? So that the canon civil laws will work. They don't work without a city and cities. The great danger to America, according to Tom Jefferson, according to Dan Webster, according to Noah Webster, was that cities would engulf our nation And if that ever happened, the backbone of our country would be destroyed. What happened to Germany? What happened to Germany? Germany, of course, was firebombed into hell, into oblivion, World War II. Germany has never recovered. You know, the Germans, before World War II, they figured it out. They said the problem is we're getting cityfied. We're getting cityfied, and their government had we call it a czar here, but a department head in the government that was tasked with encouraging people to move out of the cities, because they saw that the city culture and the city life was destroying their country, and they saw that the backbone of their country were people that were down to the ground and attached to the land. That's why I said yesterday their saying was Blut and Boden, blood and soil, land. We've separated ourselves from the land. We've allowed the urbanization, the cityfication, and with that has come sex perversion. People that don't know how to use their hands, they don't know how to work. They think they're above the ground. They're not connected to the land. You see, people say to me, Brent, you're talking about something that's impossible. That's Pollyannish. What God says is not Pollyannish. I don't have any ambition to say that I'm going to make a change in it, but I do say this: in America, we are experiencing, listen to me, here's the good news, we are experiencing right now the most massive migration from cities we've ever had in our nation. The most massive. People are getting out. Why? Because our law of the land is still strong, our common law. And it encourages that. People are leaving California by the hundreds and millions, hundreds of thousands and millions. And Newsom wants to cityfy the place. He thinks he's got a control because Los Angeles, San Francisco, the Bay Area, San Jose down there, and the corridor leading from there up Interstate 80 to Sacramento, San Diego. He has a lock on those places, and he controls, and they're cutting off the water from the most productive, financially productive farmland and area of farmland in the United States, the San Joaquin Valley. They're shutting off the water. They want to get rid of those people. Why? Can't control them. They're farmers. And they're powerful because they're productive. He didn't care. He just wants power and fill his lust and have all his sex pervert friends be able to fill their lust and live in opulence and retire with everything, like Nancy Pelosi. She's retired in 2 or 3 mansions. What's that other gal's name? I don't know what her name was. Forget. Barbara Boxer. They retire in big mansions with billions of dollars. Because their policies, they don't have to suffer the consequences of the policies they promoted in government. Oh, I'm okay. Why are you guys complaining? They don't have to suffer from it. Homelessness in California, let the immigrants in. They love chaos. That's the law of the city, friends. And city life breeds it. City life is all about giving up your rights so that you can get along with other people that live on top of you, under you, and around you. God did not make men to be piled up like rats like that. And it won't work in the final analysis. I'm giving you the truth. I'm giving you reality when I say that. You say, Brent, but it's impossible to change that now. Maybe. I'm just telling you what God says and how he made us and how it works. It doesn't work any other way. The covenant of God is to scatter over the face of the land. That's what he commands us to do as his people. Men. Time to man up. Conviction. Not brains, not brawn, but his order. And his order says, you're a man. These other, the women are women. Your children are children. Know your position in that setup. Christ is the head of every man. Every man is the head of his wife. And they are the heads of their children. Don't allow anyone to take your jurisdiction from you. Again, I cite Paul. I knew Paul well. You got to be tough. And your conviction is something, by the way, according to reality, and according to even the decisions of the Supreme Court of the United States, there's a difference between a conviction and a preference. A difference. They make a lot about this. A conviction. They're right. They've observed our law, the laws of nature. A conviction is something that never, ever, ever changes, no matter what people do to the man with the conviction. Never changes. Can't change. Why? It's who you are. Your conviction is who you are, not what you've decided you prefer. It's not a preference. How many people have I known? Lots. Back when the homeschool movement started, we started with it, right even before, well, yeah, right when we started having children, we got into it. People said, you can't do that, it's against the law. It's never been against the law in any state for parents to educate their children, never. But people thought it was because the government schools have become so powerful. Oh, we were threatened. And I got at that time, got to reading law cases about it. And what I discovered was, and I saw this happen over the next couple of decades as we were trying to educate our children. What happened? I saw a lot of people and their children get so old and they say, well, I'm going to send to school. I want them to be involved in this program at school, or I want them to do this. And they send them to school and quit. In other words, they'd say, well, I preferred. That's like the person that says, well, I prefer that women do not abort their babies, but that's none of my business. I don't want it personally, but it's none of my business. That's called a preference. There's no protection. Our law does not protect preferences. The Supreme Court has made this point. Our law protects convictions. You got a conviction that's religious, you're entitled to protection. In your conviction, you may get it, you may not, but you're entitled to it because God said. That's what our courts have said too. They're right. They don't always do it, but they have said that. In the homeschool movement, the court said, look, if you've got a conviction about educating your children at home, and it's a religious conviction, then our common law supports that. The religion clauses support that. But if the opposition can show that you change under threat, we'll throw you in jail if you don't send your children to the government schools. Well, you do what you got to do, coming back to Paul. Well, if that's what you got to do, I don't see it that way, and I'm not going to do that. We must obey God rather than men. And it must be a conviction, not a preference. And choose very carefully. Very carefully. What hill you're willing to fight and bleed on and die. Don't worry about the minutia. Jesus Christ put it this way. If a Roman soldier on a march asked you to carry his load, his pack, for 1 mile, carry it 2. Because the Roman law said if anybody, any soldier, asked a non-soldier in the Roman Empire to help him carry a load, the law required that he carry it for up to 1 mile. That was the law. And of course, different people chafed at that. They said, that's tyranny. Jesus Christ said, that's not worth dying about. That's not worth fighting about. Do it. You've got to choose, friend, and be careful. No, this is stupid, in my studied opinion, to be fighting with the courts over whether or not your driver's license is for commercial activity or not. Well, that's my personal conviction, having been in this game a long time. There are things that are important. That's not one of them. You can spend your life fighting for that, and once you've won, and I've known people that even won doing that, once you've won, you haven't changed anything, because all you're doing is hacking around on the branches of the poisonous tree. God wants you to take an axe to the root of the tree and get rid of it. He wants you to take an axe to what controls everything and get rid of it. Fight to get rid of what controls everything. That's why the laws of nature, our Constitution, our common law tradition, that controls everything. Our common law tradition, of which the Constitution is a significant slice, provides a nexus for what's in this book called the Bible to be applied in a meaningful and fair way, a decent way.